Dawn had barely broken over the imperial capital before its residents were thrown into shock. Bartolomeo, head of the conglomerate bourgeois family, had been assassinated. Cardinal Humbert of the Divine Quo Vadis family had vanished without a trace, and the Night Hound, already infamous, was named the culprit behind both. According to the official investigation, the Night Hound had struck during a feast attended by Bartolomeo and a group of academy students. Bartolomeo's final act had been to shield the students with his own life, and thanks to that sacrifice, all of them survived. Most, however, awoke with no memory of what had happened. To quiet the rising unrest, Damien, now serving as the bourgeois family's interim patriarch, assured the public that the investigation would be concluded swiftly and that calm would soon return, given that an heir had already been named. With that, the matter was, for the time being, laid to rest. Yet even with a murdered patriarch and a missing cardinal weighing on the capital, life at Colosseo Academy showed no signs of slowing. Final exams loomed, and preparations for the upcoming parent visitations left students and faculty alike without a moment's rest. Tutor stood frozen at the school's entrance, mouth hanging open in quiet disbelief at the sight before him. The academy's arboretum had transformed entirely in their absence. Beside him, Sancho, Piggy, and Bianca took in the same view, rows of trees in full, vivid bloom. Bianca crossed her arms, brow furrowed, and asked why Headmaster Winston was allowing construction on such a scale right after they had returned, grumbling that it was going to make the whole school feel like a circus. Sancho, closing his eyes and breathing in deeply, offered that he thought it smelled nicer than before. Tutor wrinkled his nose, unconvinced. To him, the air carried nothing but the sharp tang of manure. Ignoring him, Sancho inhaled once more, declaring with quiet satisfaction that the scent reminded him of warriors. Before anyone could question what that was supposed to mean, Piggy cut in to explain. The school was undergoing several beautification projects ahead of the parents' visit, he said. Mana stones were being stockpiled for the drill hall, which had suffered magical abnormalities during midterms, and preparations were also underway for the final ranking battles. It might look excessive, he admitted, but considering the 7 great families would be in attendance, perhaps it made sense. Bianca let out a derisive snort at that. Changing the subject, Tutor turned to Bianca and asked whether she had ever patched things up with Sinclair since she had switched dorms. Bianca paused, then smacked her forehead with a sigh. It wasn't that they'd had a falling out, she clarified. They simply hadn't spoken at all. For the past several days, Sinclair had stopped responding to anything, and she'd started looking noticeably unwell. Bianca had decided it was best to give her some distance, which was the real reason behind the room change. Piggy admitted he'd noticed something was off with Sinclair too. She hadn't shown up to any recent lessons, and aside from training sessions, he hadn't seen her leave her dorm at all. Sancho, hands on his hips, wondered aloud whether something had actually happened to her. Before the conversation could go further, a familiar voice called out from behind them. They turned in unison to find Dolores approaching, decked out in a high-visibility vest and waving a glow stick with theatrical flair. She greeted them warmly, remarking that it had been far too long since she'd last seen everyone. Bianca was the first to respond, asking if Dolores was doing all right, and what, exactly, was with the outfit. Dolores laughed, explaining that the student council was running the upcoming events, and as part of the management team, the vest came with the job. Piggy stared at her getup, equal parts impressed and concerned, and gently asked whether she was still shaken from what had happened in the vault, urging her not to push herself too hard. Dolores gave an awkward laugh in response. She was fine, she insisted. She'd been blindfolded through most of the ordeal and hadn't actually seen much of what went on. At the mention of it, Tutor's jaw tightened. Through gritted teeth, he spat the Night Hound's name, furious that the man had dared to take their student council president hostage. He swore that if their paths ever crossed again, he wouldn't let the Night Hound escape. Bianca didn't let that pass, dryly pointing out that it had been Tutor who froze up and couldn't do anything during the festival. Piggy and Bianca exchanged a glance and admitted somewhat sheepishly that it had been a while since they'd seen Sinclair. They were worried about her, they said, but no matter what they tried, she kept them at arm's length. Dolores listened quietly before inquiring about the others. Bianca revealed that Sinclair continued to avoid everyone, which only heightened their collective concern. Piggy, too, lowered his gaze and gripped the strap of his backpack more tightly. Unable to resist, Dolores also looked down at her feet, feeling an urgent need to see Sinclair as soon as possible. She recalled that Sinclair had appeared deeply confused back in the vault. Having witnessed a demon and a corpse, Dolores reasoned that the experience must have come as a profound shock to her. That, she believed, was why Sinclair had also fled on her own. The silence was then broken by Piggy, who raised his index finger as he remembered Vikir. He noted that Vikir had returned to their dormitory first and was likely spending some time alone in their room. Before Piggy could finish his sentence, however, Tudor covered his mouth. Closing his eyes, Tudor let out an awkward laugh and explained that Vikir had told him he was going to train and had gone on ahead. Upon hearing this, Bianca could not help but blush, while Dolores was taken aback by Vikir's unwavering determination to continue training. Meanwhile, Vikir had isolated himself inside the training gym, pushing his body to its absolute limits. Sweat streamed down his form as he persisted in his grueling regimen without rest. The other students watched him in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the extent of his extreme dedication. Within the confines of his own mind, Vikir reflected on Decaravia, the formidable entity currently lying dormant after expending his mana to protect Dolores. He recalled the utility of Decaravia's abilities during his encounter with the Sixth Corpse, noting how instrumental they had proven in that battle. He also remembered how his demonic necklace had shielded Dolores from an incoming attack. Though the Saintess might have deduced his true identity upon witnessing the necklace around his neck, he had successfully manipulated her memories through Decaravia's mind control capabilities. Nevertheless, his poor management of mana had led to excessive consumption, which explained why he had fatigued so rapidly during his confrontation with Belial. It became clear to him that he must exercise greater discipline in governing his power moving forward. With this resolve firmly in place, Vikir stepped onto the squat machine and resumed pushing himself with unrelenting intensity. The other students looked on, left utterly astounded by the sheer magnitude of the weight he was now pressing. After completing his exhaustive training session, Vikir sat on a bench with a towel draped over his head to cool down. He began to reflect on his current circumstances. Unlike in his life before regression, he was now actively striving to eliminate all 10 corpses and delay the onset of the fall. Yet, history itself was simultaneously shifting in unpredictable ways, making it increasingly difficult to forecast future events based solely on the knowledge he retained from the past. Vikir had already achieved supremacy, surpassed the 7th technique, and opened the door to the 8th. He raised his hand, though its power remained incomplete even with the Saintess's enhancement. In contrast, the remaining elite corpses had recognized the growing threat he posed and would undoubtedly consolidate their strength to prevent his interference. Frustration mounted as he realized he could not afford to relent. A dull throbbing began to pulse in his head. Reaching for his water bottle, Vikir took a sip, only to discover it was already empty. Unbeknownst to him, someone in hot pants had been observing him closely from behind. They stepped forward and offered him a cold canned drink. The unexpected gesture caused Vikir's eyes to widen in genuine surprise. It was Sinclair who appeared beside him, offering a drink. Her unexpected presence caught him off guard. With a bright smile, she asked if he would like something to drink. Later, the two of them sat together beneath the open night sky, enveloped in silence and the distant glow of stars. Sinclair drank beer to unwind, while Vikir opted for soda. She was the first to take a sip of her cold beer, remarking that a chilled beer was the perfect reward after an intense workout. She then turned to him and questioned why he was only drinking soda, offering him another beer if he wanted one. Vikir simply replied that he was fine, explaining that he did not consume alcohol after training as it interfered with muscle synthesis. Hearing his logical response, Sinclair could not find a rebuttal. She simply narrowed her eyes and continued drinking her beer. After a moment, both Vikir and Sinclair lifted their gazes to the night sky, where countless stars flickered in silent indifference. Breaking the quiet, Sinclair reflected on how she often sought refuge in this very place whenever emotions threatened to overwhelm her, drawing solace from the boundless expanse of the Milky Way. She asked if she had ever shared this with him before. Vikir studied her carefully, perceiving that beneath her composed facade, something was profoundly amiss. He replied that she had told him this once before. At his answer, a flicker of calm washed over Sinclair, and a small, relieved smile touched her lips, grateful that he had remembered. Silence descended upon them once more, heavy and suffocating. Sinclair's gaze grew distant, the warmth of her earlier smile fading into something hollow and sorrowful. Vikir took another sip of his drink, watching her from the corner of his eye, his chest tightening with the gnawing suspicion that she was only pretending to be whole. Before his regression, countless soldiers had succumbed to the crushing weight of mental anguish, fractured by the horrors of battling demons. Vikir knew, with chilling certainty, that Sinclair was now enduring the same quiet devastation. When he gently pointed out that she did not seem well, she insisted she was fine, her voice trembling, brittle as glass. Before she could finish, Vikir's voice cut through her defenses, soft but unyielding, asking if it was because of what had happened to the bourgeois family. The question landed like a blade. Sinclair's face drained of color, her expression darkening as his words pierced straight through her carefully constructed walls. Her body began to quake, tremors rippling through her frame as she desperately, shakily denied his question, insisting she remembered nothing. Vikir watched her, his heart heavy with confusion. If she was unaffected, then why did she look so broken? Her denial crumbled in an instant, and without warning, tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and unstoppable. She seemed bewildered by her own tears, as though her body was betraying a pain her mind refused to acknowledge. Her composure shattered completely, and the anguish she had buried so deep finally clawed its way to the surface. Vikir reached out and gently clasped her trembling hand, the warmth of his touch, a quiet anchor in her storm. In that moment, he understood with painful clarity that leaving her alone that night had been a grievous error. She had been carrying an unbearable weight all by herself, and he had failed to see it. Then, at last, Sinclair's voice broke through the silence, fragile, raw, and drenched in grief. She confessed that the night hound had taken her father's life. If you're enjoying this series, please give the video a like. It really helps others discover it. And if you'd like to see more, consider subscribing to the channel. Want the next chapter? Comment next chapter below.